And now, our own Jessie Gappel moderates a wonderful panel on writing compelling relationships. Young adult authors Nina Varela, wearing round glasses and a navy blue and white striped sweater, Leah Johnson sporting a baseball cap and a team jersey, and Raquel Vasquez Gilliand, who has curly hair and a shelf of books behind her. Panelists, take it away.
Hi everyone, my name is Jessie Gappel. I am a programming assistant for Geek Girl Con, and today I'm really excited to bring you a panel. It's going to be Friends to Enemies to ? Writing compelling relationships. And today I have a full panel of amazing YA authors. I'll let them introduce themselves and their projects.
I'm Nina Varela. My pronouns are she, her, and I wrote the Crier's War duology, and I'm now working on my middle grade debut, Juniper Harvey and the Vanishing Kingdom.
All right, I'm Leah Johnson. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the author of the YA Prom Pom. You Should See Me a Crown. Here's a copy of my book. And the forthcoming Rise to the Sun, which will be out summer 2021.
And I'm Raquel Vasquez Gilliand. I'm the author of Sia Martinez and the Moonlit Beginning of Everything. And my second YA book is coming next year, and it's called How Moon Fuentes Fell in Love with the Universe.
Ooh.
Okay, perfect. Well, let's just get right into it. So when we're writing relationships, where is it that you, where does it start? Do you decide the relationship before fully developing the characters? Do you develop the characters first and then see what type of relationship makes sense? Where does it start?
Well, I think I'm an idea first writer. And so if I have a kernel of an idea about what a story can be or could become, that is the thing from which everything else blooms. And so whoever the main character is the only main character that could get us all the way through that story. And so inversely, if I'm thinking about who the love interest is going to be, it has to be the only person who could have tension that would sustain and propel a narrative. And so one of the best pieces of advice I got early on was like, the goals of your main character and your love interest should actually be at odds with one another so that there is already that sort of built-in momentum that keeps the story going, keeps the romance going, gives us something to work towards that third act breakup. And so that's sort of how I always approach it. Also, the love interest in my first book very much was just wish fulfillment. I was like, I'm just gonna throw my favorite things, like when I was 16, all the things that I would have wanted in a girlfriend, we're just gonna give it to this character. And so you could also try that.
That's relatable. Yeah, I'm very much the same in that I start out with like the contrast of the two characters. Like with Crier's War, the first seed of the character that I had was Crier, because I've always been obsessed with characters who are taught to be like cold and unfeeling, but are actually, so feeling that they can't contain it, and they have to, they end up like having to accept that about themselves. And so I started with her, who's like this person who's supposed to be cold but is warm, and then I needed to contrast her with someone who ended up being Ayla, who was like already burning and just such like an angry, prickly person that, like, as Leah was saying, like they're the only two people that could make each other grow and change the way they need to, like to get to the end of the story, and then also just to have those like really satisfying character arcs and feel like whole characters at the end who have grown in a really good way together.
This question stumps me just a little bit because I guess I'm more intuitive in developing the story and its relationships. I don't have like a plan usually, but I think it would be accurate to say that I think a lot about an archetypal journey for the protagonist. And when you're on that sort of journey, you're going to face people who help you and people who make your conflicts so much worse and force you to face, or force the character to face their traumas and their wounds. And with that in mind, I also, similar to Leah, doing the wish fulfillment, like when I wrote Sia Martinez, I wrote kind of like how I wish my parents were more like when I was her age. And in my second book, which is a romance, I also wrote what I wish I had encountered in my first romantic relationship as a young adult.
Have you ever been surprised by your relationships? And a question for everybody, but yeah, have you ever been surprised by the relationships that have come out as you're going?
Actually, yeah, this was fun. In my second book, and the first draft, without giving too much away, there are two characters who really hate each other. They're not main characters. And while I was reading the first draft, trying to figure out my goals for the second draft, it just popped in my head. I'm like, oh my God, they love each other. They're in love. so that just that was really surprising, and it just worked out so well. So it was a pleasant surprise.
That is the best kind of surprise.
Awesome.
I've ever been surprised by a romance in a story, but I've been surprised by how friendships sort of become more intimate and more complex over the course of a story. Like those are the things that are the most fun to me to write, is like, oh, wow, we're bantering, we're going back and forth. Wait a minute, this is chef's kiss.
Is that kind of what happened with, oh my gosh, Liz and Jordan? When Liz and Jordan, was that one of the relationships that you didn't expect that banter?
Yeah, I certainly didn't anticipate that their relationship would actually become central to the story. It just emerged really naturally as I was writing, because part of what I wanted to do was illustrate platonic intimacy between a boy and a girl that didn't have to blossom into a romance. Because I think for so many of us, especially young queer folks, the expectation is that like if you have homies, like you're going to like hook up with a homie at some point, and you're like, that's really, really not going to happen. But there is like, there's sort of like a tension that exists there, just because of like what is projected onto you. And it felt really permission giving to like reach back to like 15, 16-year-old Leah and be like, yeah, just because this guy is your best friend doesn't mean that you also have to have feelings for him. And so Jordan just became like the one person who Liz could rely on, who had no other intention, like no romantic intention, no, like even Liz's family needs her for certain things. But Jordan is the only person who's like, I actually don't want anything from you other than the fact that like you just are here and you're one of my favorite people in the world. And so how can we like give and take in this relationship in a way that like isn't about what we can produce for one another?
That's so beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, me too. I felt like Liz and Jordan's relationship was like one of the most compelling aspects of the story to me. Like, it's really powerful to like show that, I think, for sure.
Thank you. Did y'all see the half of it?
Yes.
Okay. So
Yeah.
Half of it was so crucial to me. I was like, which obviously it came out like after the book was done, but after I watched it, I was like, oh, this makes so much sense to me now. I love a himbo. I love it. And I love just a well-intentioned guy, queer girl, like relationship. It just,
there's no better combination.
Yeah, there's no better combination. It really like speaks to my spirit.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, my current goal is to write, I want like the ideal like lesbian and her himbo best friend in my next YA. Like that's the goal right there. Essential friendship.
We deserve it, and I want it. I can't wait for it.
I'll deliver
to that. Perfect. Oh my goodness. Okay, great. Okay, so we talked a little bit about this, but I wonder if we could go a little deeper. So how do you think the relationships impact the plot of your novel? And what's important to remember, you know, like when you're building those relationships?
For me, it's always about like how they affect each other and the ways that they like that their influence on each other makes them make different decisions they might otherwise make, or you know, propels them into like more intense decisions, or like they start acting reckless. Like all of these things can come out of this one central relationship that is, you know, so much of the emotional heart of the story. Like for Crier's War, it's like very literal, because the whole thing is like Ayla wants to murder Crier, and Crier is falling in love with Ayla, and like obviously they're pretty diametrically opposed on those sides. But then as you know, Ayla's feelings start changing, she starts realizing, well, maybe I don't want to murder this person necessarily. And that's what, like, you know, what propels the entire second book, which is them, you know, kind of coming into their strength and their power as you know, as people at this kind of forefront of this like revolution. Oh, sorry, I totally flicked my headphones. And you know, that's like what every change comes out of, is their desire to protect each other, or you know, if they're fighting, you know, they're acting reckless and stuff like that. So it all stems from that, you know, sort of emotional beating heart of the story.
I feel like one of the most important relationships in Sia Martinez, for Sia, the main character, is the relationship with her ghostly abuela. And this just popped in my head when I read this question, because her grandmother is there to remind her of her goal, which is your mother is still alive and she's out there, and you need to focus on that. And I just think that each character in Sia's relationship serves as a touchstone, reminding her of what's important to her and clarifying her goals for her when she gets distracted or lost. And yeah, that's it. That's good.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I had internalized really early on in my like story consumption journey was that, you know, your love interest is supposed to be like your missing puzzle piece, and they're supposed to fill in all your empty spaces. And that's kind of graphic, but you know what I mean? They're supposed to be all the things that you're not. And I don't think that and they're supposed to like complete you and all this Tom Cruise style stuff. That's not accurate. Like, that's not the intention of a love story. I think, like Nina said, one of the functions of a love interest is to propel your main character occasionally into things that they would not do, is to give action points to the story, is to, like, craft wise, there's a lot of function to a love interest. But when I'm thinking about like, what is the thing I want young readers to take away from the story, it's not necessarily like you need somebody to, you know, be all the things that you're not. I don't think that's accurate, but you need somebody who's going to push you to be the most full version of yourself. You need somebody who's going to encourage you to embrace all the parts of yourself that maybe you've been afraid of. You need somebody who's going to stand by you when sometimes it feels like the rest of the world is crashing down around you. And so when I think of a romance through those terms, it becomes really clear like the role that it's going to play in like moving the plot forward, especially because I write rom-coms or romances just in general. And so like the romance is the plot, sort of. And so whatever it takes for these two characters to build on each other and like create tension for each other and propel each other forward is what I have to have in order for us to have a satisfying 3-act narrative.
Yeah, just like challenge after challenge after challenge. And then you just sort of like shape that into a story, basically. Yeah.
There's like, what is it? It's like, since Save the Cat, they talk about it's like Newton's third law is for every action there has to be an equal reaction. And so like for every emotional high point there has to be an emotional low. For every moment where it feels like, oh man, are they getting together, there has to be a moment where it's like, no, they're never gonna get together, you know, like
no, never.
That's how we sustain ourselves for 300 pages of a book. And so one of the mistakes that I make, especially like in early drafts of a book, is I make the love interest way too perfect. Like you can always tell, like, Leah, that I know what you're doing here, and they have to have some flaws, otherwise we don't have a book. And so that's always like my revision process. I was just saying before the camera started, I'm like, 25 rounds into a revision right now. And it's like every round is like, my editor's like, Leah, I'm begging you, can you please give her a conflict? Can you please give her a problem? Leah, why are we here if the characters are already perfect?
Mm-hmm.
Great
there's validity in just a naturally perfect queer girl.
Right.
You know, I feel like that exists.
It happens. I personally have never experienced it, but I'm sure it's valid.
Yeah. It's out there. It's fantasy.
Right.
Oh my goodness, it's funny. Okay, yeah. Oh, so I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of the arcs that a lot of the relationships go through. So I think there are so many relationships in every one of your books, like where the relationship starts for multiple characters, where that relationship starts is very different than where it ends up. And so what do you do to like build those arcs and make them feel satisfying?
One of the notes I write myself when I get to the end of a draft and I get to that, what I hope is a satisfying ending is, was this earned? And what I mean by that is, have these characters gone through their arcs or the emotional depth to get to this point? And a lot of my revisions revolve around making sure that they actually fight harder in order to earn that, the making up speech or the making up gesture, or did they, for instance, in my romance, did she actually heal her wounds enough to be able to realistically develop a relationship with her love interest? So that's the one thing I thought about with this question was it earned? It's something I'm asking myself, was this arc earned? So
for me, like, so much of it was about the yearning. Like, especially because in book 2, they're separated for like the first like 150 pages. And I was so scared, like, oh my God, like everyone's going to hate this. You know, they're reading for this relationship. They want the girls to be together. Da-da. And so I had to like try, you know, to challenge myself to keep them present in each other's minds, you know, for that entire section when they were separated. And like, it was a really good exercise because I was able to, you know, just really delve into how they were thinking of each other and like hating that they were thinking of each other or like worrying about each other, and just how having like those feelings sustain that, you know, separation. And then once they were, you know, together again, a lot of it was about kind of deconstructing the images of each other that they had. Because, you know, when you're first getting to know someone, obviously, like, you have all these ideas about them or you built them up in your head. And, you know, as Leo was saying, like, you have to realize their flaws and realize they're not perfect. And like, so much of like a really satisfying relationship to me is having those conversations between the characters where like you see them realizing each other's flaws or insecurities or weaknesses, and getting to know each other on on so much of a deeper level than just like, I'm so intrigued by you and you're so beautiful and like you're exciting to me and da da da. Like, they have to learn the sort of boring everyday kind of quotidian details of each other, and like still find beauty and meaning and love in that. And so it was really fun to develop that over a bunch of harrowing scenes.
I'm sure we all know who I'm talking about, but there's like a certain white male writer who got a lot of critiques, like when his books were like at their peak, about these like lackluster white boys who like put these white girls on a pedestal and just like idealize them over the course of a book. And then there's not really any reckoning with the fact that like they are not actually the cardboard cutout of a human being that the boy made them out to be the entire time. Like, they're not just a manic pixie dream girl. They have like actual interiority and depth and an arc of their own, which kind of gets obfuscated by the boy's desire. And so I think one of the things that you bring up, Nina, is super important. And that's like, at what point does the narrative shatter the illusion of perfection for the love interest, right? And like, what does that do for the story? So you know, I'm thinking about like the breakup scene in You Should See Me in a Crown when, you know, my main character and her love interest have this huge blow up at a party because this entire time, one of them has believed that the other was like wholly altruistic and had these really great intentions. And that was never what they projected. They had just like sort of gathered that on their own, and they had never really dug into like, okay, why might you be making the decisions that you're making? Well, how does that affect the way you move through the world, et cetera? And so that moment to me, even though I hate writing breakup scenes just in general, that moment to me was the thing that the entire book was hurtling towards. Because like, this is the moment of truth. It's like when we finally get to see all the characters involved for who they are, and we get to figure out like, okay, so now that we've stripped you to your barest parts, are you still a person that I want to be with? And that to me can sustain pretty much an entire book. I mean, like between yearning and then like shattering this illusion, that's a novel. And then Raquel brings up the question, the capital T, capital Q, trademark, the question. And that's, was this ending earned? If it wasn't, you got to go back to the beginning and start over. Like there's so much more work to be done. And so, yeah, I don't even know if that answered the question, but that's definitely what I'm thinking about.
No, that's totally true. And like, that's something that I love so much about writing like enemies to lovers style romances, or challengers to lovers, or rivals to lovers, or whatever it is, because like you kind of get that thing where they see the worst parts of each other perhaps a lot sooner than they otherwise would. And they might see each other's like nastiest, angriest, pettiest selves and still be like, you know, I still love you and you're still like this incredibly worthwhile person to me, even with all these flaws. And like, you kind of get it all out at the beginning and then you can develop from there instead of, you know, sort of not finding those like deeper parts of each other until a lot longer down the line.
My second book is an enemies to lovers romance. And yeah, I'm excited about it. So what you just said, Nina, reminded me that a lot of time, or at least in my book, the pettiness is a defense to sort of hide your vulnerabilities. And usually, or at least in my book, the love interest can see right through that BS and kind of force the protagonist to face herself and realize, like we said, that she's worthwhile despite what she perceives as her weaknesses or her vulnerabilities. So.
That's the perfect partner. I love it. I'm ready pre-ordering.
You were touching on this with the previous questions a little bit, so I think I'll expand on it. But I was curious about like when you're writing romantic relationships specifically, and you know you're writing that chemistry. Like, how do you keep that going for 300 pages? Keep people interested and make people feel like, oh, they're gonna get together. Like, how do you, get that going?
As I said before, the yearning is a big part of it. Like, in all seriousness, it was something I had to sort of like let myself write in a way, because, you know, I spent like all of my formative writing years writing a lot of what I thought I was supposed to write, which was, you know, very heterosexual, very like obviously Twilight inspired stories where like, you know, the boy and the girl meet and there's like, you know, insta love and and all that stuff happens. And so I had to like really challenge myself both to slow down in a writing sense and then also like in a sort of, you know, I guess queer sense, like really writing this first like long form you know, romance between two queer girls. Like it was kind of a weird challenge, letting myself like put as much, I guess, like longing and like raw emotion as I had to into the narrative. And that was a big part of it, is sort of like these, you know, moments of intense intimacy and vulnerability kind of scattered like, you know, like geodes in this, you know, larger story. And it just keeps the readers going toward those moments. And each one, you know, unearths a new facet of this relationship and a new level of intimacy. And that's, you know, what I relied on just to keep it exciting over the 300 pages is just like these little moments sprinkled throughout, and like banter, and just, you know, both like the sort of hard conversations, but then also the fun moments where like they're bantering and they're hanging out and like making each other laugh, and you realize like, yeah, you know, they are in the middle of like a horrible situation and there's all this super dramatic stuff going around, but they're also just two 16-year-old girls who have crushes on each other, and they're like learning to love each other as people instead of as props. And so, yeah, it was fun. It was fun having that unfold and revealing.
Yeah, I think about this a lot because I'm not somebody who writes like a slow burn. I'm not good at it. That's not really my strong suit. I'm like, let's get them together in the first 100 pages. And then let's keep them together for maybe like 20 pages. And then we have to like immediately drive them apart again. And so for me, the thing that keeps us going to the end is like, one, I can promise you there's always going to be a happy ending in a Leah Johnson novel. And so like, because we know that that's the case, the real joy is in figuring out like, okay, so what's going to challenge them like personally, like individually and together? What's going to be the thing that brings them back together? Like, I think even though there's not a lot of mystery in terms of like whether or not it's going to work out, it's definitely going to work out. I think the real thing that sustains us for 300 pages is like, okay, how many different ways can we throw these two characters into situations that challenge them? And also like, how swoony can we make it when they finally get together? Like, those are the things that I'm like thinking the most about.
And that's such like a, oh, sorry, go on.
No, you're responding. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, that's such like a comfort though, reading a book where like, you know that no matter what, there's gonna be a happy ending. Like, you just feel so taken care of, and it makes it even more fun. Like, you know, and at least in my opinion, when you know that you're being taken care of in the end and you have this thing to look forward to, like all of the twists and turns are just so much more satisfying.
Yeah, especially for like LGBTQIA relationships, because it's like so often those relationships will end up being tragic in a lot of the media that we've been given before. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I'm also thinking about like, how can we put these two characters together? And I'm glad you raised the point that like queer books do have a different sort of expectation placed on them. Because I'm also trying to figure like, how can we put these two characters together in a way that gives them a challenge, but also doesn't suggest that the way that queer people earn love is in exchange for trauma.
Yeah.
And so that's one of those things that's like really tough to balance. And I wonder if you feel the same way, Nina, especially when you have a book that's like really rooted in, and it's in serious tension. Like the tension in my book is like, we're running against each other for prom queen. The tension in Crier's War is like, I want to kill you. And so, and so it's a little different.
Selling more knives.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's exactly as you said, it's a really hard line to walk because, you know, I'm so invested in having a happy ending for them. And that was actually something like I posted about this on Twitter because I was getting so many readers like, you know, I'm so worried that Crier and Ayla are going to die. You know, I don't know how this is going to end. And I was like, y'all, like, they're not going to die. They're going to have, I don't want to spoil it for you, but I am going to. They're going to have a happy ending. Like, you don't need to worry about this. And like, I was kind of taken aback, but it makes so much sense because, you know, especially with like, with sapphic pairings, there's just like such a big death track record. And like, I wanted to have all of the intensity and, you know, conflict of this, you know, stabby relationship, but then also make it feel like healthy. And a lot of that was like those kind of smaller moments of banter and friendship, because, you know, even with like Ayla literally tried to kill her at the end of book 1, and they're doing all these different things. Once they kind of see each other eye to eye, they're able to strip back all those like prickly layers and just kind of get to know each other's hearts without all the sort of performance. And so it was really about mining those moments of like, they're getting along and they see each other and they're being kind to each other and they're making each other laugh, even in the middle of like horrible, stressful situations, that hopefully like balanced all the tension to make it clear that this is a healthy relationship. And even though horrible things are happening, they're going to be okay in the end.
I actually need to study this question because I am working on my first adult romance and I'm having difficulty keeping the chemistry for 300 pages. My solution has always been, let's, at least always in the one other romance I've written, the characters keep having conflicts, and a lot of those conflicts reflect their internal conflicts of not feeling worthy for one reason or another. And in my most recent romance I'm working on, the feedback I'm getting is like, your love interest is way too much of a jerk, and it's like that's can't be the. I'm learning that your love interest cannot do anything unforgivable. Not that he murders anyone or anything, but he just, I need to make him more endearing. So that's my contribution, is I am still learning this myself. So
Absolutely. Okay,
That is
cool.
very valid.
Yeah. Okay, so wanted to move on to, so I think one of the most compelling things for all of your books was their relationships to the parents and guardians. And, you know, I think they all have like these really complex, interesting relationships to them. And I was just thinking, like, you know, it's probably really important to nail that in YA. And I'm just kind of interested in you talking about those relationships. And yeah.
I think whether a parent is present, or a parent or guardian is present on the page or not, the parent is always sort of looming in the narrative in some way. And so in You Should See Me in a Crown, the absence of Liz's mother sort of drives the entire book, because her mom passed away when she was younger from complications related to sickle cell. And now Liz's little brother also has sickle cell. And so the ways that she thinks about family and the tenuousness of family and responsibility to family has everything to do with her mom. And so because of all those things, it also has everything to do with the way she thinks about love. And so like that parental relationship, whether the mom is still in the story or not, is still very much, or physically on the page in the story, still very much influences how the story functions. But, you know, Liz is also being raised by her grandparents, and that changes the narrative as well, right? Like I'm thinking about non-traditional family structures and about the way that sometimes the people who raise us are not the people who give birth to us. They're the people who like see us walk into school. You know, they're the guy at the register at the bodega. It's the, you know, it's our aunts, it's our uncles. Like I'm always thinking about how community has everything to do with how you're brought up. And so the role that plays in the story talks about is really just about like, how do the people that love us shape the person we become? And then in Rise to the Sun, which is my second novel, there are no parents on the page because it's at a music festival. And so I'm like, how do we bring parents into this narrative? Well, it's like, okay, so the question then is like, what are we running from and what are we running towards? And a lot of times those things have everything to do with our families or our parents or the expectations that have been projected onto us by the people that care about us the most. And so that was a lot of what I felt when I was a teenager. Is like a lot of pressure coming from, and not even intentionally. These are things that like I just internalized because I wanted to do my family proud. But because when I was younger, I was thinking about those things in a much different way. It very much influenced everything about the way I moved through the world. And so, yeah, I'm always thinking about like, how can we complicate these relationships while also illustrating like, especially once again, coming back to the fact that these are queer narratives. I'm interested in having parents that are not like disowning their kids because they're queer. If they're mad at their kids, it's not because they're gay. It's because they have like spray painted a penis on the side of the school for their senior prank and like it's like brought shame on the family or something. You know what I mean? Like how can we create complex familial relationships that also always return back to love? That's what I'm trying to do.
I'm kind of the opposite, at least for Crier's, because like a lot of Crier's arc was like realizing that her father was a horrible person, and I was unsure of how to handle the end of it because I wasn't sure whether to make him like to redeem him or not. And I settled on no. And it was just it's such a painful, awful thing to, be a teenager realizing that your parents are not only like not the incredible like heroes you might have thought they were, but also they're like hurting people and they're doing these terrible things and you need to stop them and it's going to destroy your relationship, but it's, they're hurting people, so you need to stop it. And like, so Crier had this kind of awful, painful arc where she realized like, I can't be around him anymore. I need to stop what he's doing. He is not redeemable and I'm not going to save him. And that was a really hard thing to do with her father, but it was important to me that he was not redeemable because I don't think he was. And I wanted to show like that sometimes, your family is going to kind of just be your found family. And this is, again, like this is really common with like young queer kids. A lot of the time, your parents are just not going to be your safe place, and your found family is going to be your safe place. And it's survivable, and it is a horrible thing that happens, and it shouldn't happen. But there are families elsewhere, and you'll find your friends. And so then on the other end of the spectrum, like Ayla's parents died when she was little in this like awful traumatic way, and so she had a lot of just PTSD and horrible pain from that lingering that she had to not heal from, because you don't heal from it, but learn to deal with in a healthier way instead of anger and pain and violence. So their parents were both like these big specters over their lives in very different ways, and they had different endings with those.
I don't know if people generally know this, but I have a master's degree in poetry, and my first 2 books are poetry. And in my poetry, which really does inform my prose, I have studied the lineage of my own family and how trauma is passed on. And so I think that's something that comes up in my novels, or I know it does, that there is a trauma that is passed on either through abuse or other ways that are actually well-meaning. For my parents, it was overprotectiveness. And so in Sia Martinez, she talks about espanto, which means terror. And in our family, when you say someone has espanto, it means that their soul became so afraid that a piece of it ran away, and you need someone like my grandmother who does the rituals to call it back. And I've grown up with that belief system, and so when I write about teenagers and their parents, what I consider is not just the dynamic of their characters and how they interact, but also what sort of things are being passed on, not just trauma, but also humor and food, the way they can bond over not just traumatic things, but also happier things as well. And more so, I think it shows up in my second book, in which Moon, the protagonist, has to make a decision about what she's going to do about her mother's abuse. So
thank you so much. I wanted to kind of move into friendships, because again, there's like so many really interesting and great friendships in all the books. So like, what is it that you can, because I feel like it might be harder to make conflict between friends because they're friends. So what do you do to keep those dynamics interesting?
Oh, I have the opposite sensation. I think it's very easy to drum up conflict between friends because if I remember correctly, which I do, in high school, it was a lot of fighting with my friends.
You're right.
It was very much like, oh my gosh, like I didn't know I was on three-way. Why didn't you tell me? Like now I like said something I wasn't supposed to say and now she heard me. Or like, oh, I didn't get invited to that sleepover, but you got invited and you're going. You shouldn't go just out of loyalty to me. It's like these smallest, pettiest things, like when you're at, especially that juncture in your life, feel really massive. And so like to me, friendship is something that of course, is like what sustains you through high school, but it's also very fraught in a lot of ways. And so like drumming that up to the, like bringing that up to the surface in a story feels really natural to me. Especially because like I write contemporary. And so there's no question. It's like, if you're in high school, you're probably going to fight with your friends. And I think for You Should See Me in a Crown, I did the same thing that I do with love interest, which is that like, what you want and what I want are at odds with each other, or like the way you intend on accomplishing your goals are at odds with the way that I intend on accomplishing mine. And so that creates like a natural fault line between these characters. Like there's going to be a quake at some point, but it's just a question of when. And so, yeah, that's what I think about. Like also you can love somebody fiercely and also really, really hate the way they be moving. And so that's one of those things that I had to think about, and You Should See Me in a Crown a lot. Like Gabby and Liz have been friends their entire lives, but Gabby and Liz are also very different people. And so in the moments where you don't understand why a friend would behave the way they're behaving, but you also can't abide by the way they're behaving, then it's like, look, we either got to figure this out or we got to call it quits, because there's no way we can keep going on opposite directions like this without pulling this thread that ties us together apart completely.
Oh yeah, like especially if it's a long friendship like that, like you can cut deep, because so often it'll be the kind of fight that starts out as like about some totally petty surface thing, and then like 15 minutes later you're somehow both like crying and talking about something that happened like 7 years ago that you never got over. And like it's there's so much tangled drama in friendship that can absolutely be just as like heart-stopping or devastating or exciting as with a romance. And so right now I'm writing a middle grade, and so like it's so fun to like focus on these kind of brand new, like, baby, like they're 11 years old friendships. And like, always keep in mind that, as Leah said, like when you're that age, like when you're preteen, when you're a teenager, so much of what you're feeling is like the biggest, like literally just the biggest thing you've ever felt. And like when you have a fight with a friend, even if it's the kind of thing where like 2 weeks later you've forgotten about it and it's over, like it's just like in the moment it's devastating, and you feel like you're never gonna hang out again, and it's totally over, and there's just so much there. And so I had a lot of fun with Criers with Ayla and Benji, especially because they had that like lifelong friendship where you can like with someone you've just started dating, like they can say something horrible to you and you're just like, screw you, like you don't know me, we'll go away. But with like your best friend of 7 years, they can say one thing and just like cut you down. And so it was like, especially as Ayla and Benji started having more and more conflict over Crier, and like how Benji thought Ayla was like basically betraying them by getting closer to her. There was so much there in like the history of their relationship where you can say one thing like you're always like this, and it's like, oh, how dare you, know me more than anyone else, like you know exactly how to cut to the heart of my soul. And so yeah, like it's just as fun as with romance, like the friend breakup, to mess around with that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And Sia Martinez, Sia has her longtime best friend Rose, and they both sort of begin romantic relationships, but they keep it from one another for different reasons, and it starts to create a tension. And just like you said, Nina, when they have their big blowout, things are coming up that no one mentioned when it first happened, and it's cuts very deeply. And I can just remember, just like with Leah, when I was a teenager, at least for me, although I did fall in love very deeply in high school, I guess in the back of my mind, I always knew that breaking up with a romantic partner was possible. But when it's your friends, you just assume that's going to be there forever. And so when you have that argument with a friend, or when you have a friend break up, to me, it just, it was really difficult. And so I think that there's a lot to investigate in YA and friendships.
Absolutely.
There's this moment in Sia Martinez actually where I had to turn off the audiobook because I was listening to it in my car, and I just was like, and I don't even know if it was intended to be this emotionally, like if it was intended to hit me so hard, but I was like driving through Brooklyn, just trying to go and get some Burger King. And there's a moment where the two best friends like have gone to this cafe together for their entire lives. And like even after one of their moms died, even though she really did, I don't know. Sitting in the same exact booth. And then one day Sia walks by, and it's their booth, okay? It's their booth. Then Sia walks by, and the best friend is in there with somebody else at their booth. When I tell you, I turned it off. And I just started crying because I was like, that is such a betrayal. Like, and it's not even the most emotionally fraught moment of the book. Like, it's a very emotional, but like for me, there was just something about the intensity of that moment, because like to be a teenager and to have this thing that you hold sacred with one other person in the world, and to be sort of betrayed in this way by this person that you thought like would never do you wrong. I was just like, oh, that's it. That's the
thank you for saying that. To go back to another question, that specific scene I had to add in like revision 3 because Sia and Rose needed to earn their big blowout, which had been there from the beginning. So that it was something I added later. So I'm glad it worked. And though I'm sorry you cried.
I'm just very emotional. So miracle I haven't cried on this panel. I just cried.
Yeah.
But that was really good.
Well, the scene did its job.
Yeah.
I just think it's so amazing that, you can just kind of write some words and then it makes people have an emotional reaction. Like, how cool is that?
Yeah. And so like the unexpected things too. Like there have been parts that like I cried while writing them because like it was like really personal for me. And then like it didn't get like a huge reaction from like the friends I showed it to, but there was a totally other part that I, just kind of was writing in there for the plot. And like you get comments like, how dare you? What are you doing? It's like, oh, okay. Noted for next time. I'll keep that in mind.
Okay, great. So also I wanted to talk a little bit about themes and like how can you drive a theme through a relationship, and like I feel like a lot of relationships can kind of shift our perspective on certain issues. Maybe we can talk a little bit on that.
Yeah. So if you want to talk about theme, it's funny because I was just teaching. I just taught a lecture about this the other day, actually. So the way that I explain it to my students is that in the first like 20% of a novel, you have your opening image, your theme stated, and the introduction of the B story, right? Like that happens in the very first chunk of the first act.
I'm like taking notes right now.
I know.
And
Free writing lesson. Keep on going.
There's this moment where it can be a scene, it can be a literal image that you have created in the text, whatever, but that is the thing that tells us what the theme of the entire book is going to be. So in The Hunger Games, for instance, you get to the theme stated when Katniss volunteers for Prim at the reaping. We know then that the theme is going to be sacrifice, it's going to be loyalty, it's going to be self-determination, like whatever the case may be. And so this is the thing that the B story helps us sustain throughout the book. So the B story is your subplot. Your subplot is a way to arrive at the theme delivered. So like for a lot of stories, the love story is the thing that helps us realize whatever the theme was supposed to be in the beginning. And so like Katniss has to learn to trust somebody new when she finds Peeta painted under a log or whatever. She has to figure out whether or not she's going to learn to rely on somebody that's not herself. She's going to have to figure out that she can trust other people who are not herself or Prim or Gale. I use the Hunger Games because it's like the most accessible example. But anyway, that's how I think about theme, and that's how I sustain a theme throughout the book. It's like, okay, what are we learning at the very beginning of the book? And the theme is the thing that we have to return back to at the end in order for this to feel satisfying. Boom.
Thank you, seriously. That was great. I learned something.
I'm giving it up to Jessica Brody because like I have like bastardized Save the Cat so much, but like that was such a jumping off point for me. Yeah, like, it's right here. I can't pull it out because it's the stack of book that's holding on my laptop. But like it was a thing that like taught me how to plot to begin with. And like, of course, now I don't use that because, you know, after you kind of figure it out, it's like, all right, do I have to use this beat sheet? But yeah, I spent $60,000 on an MFA that did not teach me how to structure a novel. So at this point, I read whatever I can to figure it out.
Oh, honestly, I went to school for screenwriting, and like to this day, the thing that I use when I'm trying to figure out plot is I think about the plot of How to Train Your Dragon, and because that is perfectly plotted, like to the minute. It's like, you know, perfect 8-sequence structure. And so I just like go and like watch a clip or read a little bit of the script, and I'm like, oh, that's what I should totally do. Like I'll have to like switch this, you know, emotional moment around right here at this part. And like, I don't think about the classes I took in college anymore.
Because I don't know.
It's all gone.
Like in practice, I don't know that they actually taught me all that much about how to the thing. Like if I did, you know, I found my voice maybe. I like got to play around with like what stories were most important to me, got to figure out what audience I was writing towards and for. But like the rest of that stuff, I feel like you just kind of learn it as you go. I don't know if that's everybody's experience, but that's definitely what happened to me.
No, for sure. I always tell people like, you know, it can be really great, but it can also be a way to totally burn out your love of writing. And like, you can still learn like absolutely just as much by reading Save the Cat or watching How to Train Your Dragon or Shrek. So save yourself the $60,000. I forgot the question.
Yeah, I don't know.
Absolutely no.
All right, I was on a rant. I really started rambling.
No, I learned.
No, it was so good.
How to Save Your Dragon. I haven't seen that one yet. So.
It's really good. It's really
so
fun.
good.
It's perfectly plotted.
I put it on for my son like a little while ago. I think he's old enough now that he can watch it. At the time, I had to turn it off because he wouldn't. So.
Yeah. So the question was like, how do we bring out theme through the relationships? And
well, I don't consciously think about the theme, so I don't know how to. Maybe perhaps you should go, Nina, because I want to think about it a little bit more.
Oh, I'm going to say something amazing. I think about this all the time. Yeah, like for me, I'm kind of the same where it's a lot, like I find it comes out in the writing often. Like right now I'm literally about to turn in, my deadline is today, my first draft of my middle grade. And so, you know, I've been figuring it out like as I go on. And a large part of it is that my main character has anxiety. And so she, you know, has like all this social anxiety, and she's just moved to a new place, and she's, you know, like just freezes up when she tries to talk to people. And so, you know, obviously a big part of her arc was like confronting her fears, not like, you know, oh, it's happened to you now, that so now you can like, you know, be healed and you'll never be anxious again. But like, you know, more like learning, you know, I have these fears, but I'm learning how to deal with them and how to, you know, like hold still and breathe and like, you know, kind of talk myself through this and like become, you know, I'm still just as scared, but I'm better at dealing with it. And I know that it'll be okay. And so like, that was sort of her, like, I guess character. I literally don't know if this is what a theme is. I'm kind of just going at this point. but yeah, that was like her fear, and then that had to be contrasted with, you know, her like baby love interest, which is like this princess from another world. And yeah, like a lot of it was just overcoming those fears and kind of, you know, I guess like coming into yourself and realizing who you are and that it's okay to be who you are and that who you are is awesome. And yeah, so I think fear would be a theme. See, this is really like, I say like, oh, I didn't learn anything in college, probably because I didn't like pay attention, I guess, when they were teaching about themes. But I think that's fear. Yeah, for sure. This is just teaching you like there's levels of technical ability. And sometimes writing the yearning just kind of covers all of the details that you might not have. That's my process.
Okay. I think I just lied a little when I said I don't think about theme, because what you just did, Nina, made me realize that the YA book I'm working on now, which would be number 3, which almost no one knows anything about, so I'm not going to reveal too much. But the theme of the book is it's about sort of about animism, which is something I was raised with, believing that there's something more to the more than human world, to use the words of Robin Wall Kimmerer, than what we in general our culture perceives as important. So that's a lot of words for a book which is about a girl who may or may not be human, and where the line is drawn as far as how we view the humanity of creatures or things that we perceive as like kind of on a lower level than humans. I've been reading about what we call our era, and it's either the Holocene or the Anthropocene, and the Anthropocene is just very human-centric. So all that is coming into this book, and when the theme comes up, it comes up in lines that refer to the protagonist, where she feels like there's something a little different about her, and she's not sure how or why. So that's how I'm working the theme in right now, I think. Although I'm sure it's happening on levels that I'm not even aware of.
That's the thing. I think it emerges really naturally. I just want to say this really quickly. I think it emerges really naturally, especially in early drafts. I just think that like it's when you're like trying to teach like a new writer how to like write a book, they want like formulaically, like, okay, at this percent, what am I supposed to have done? What should be said here? How should it happen? And I think that like that's why it's just like when I have to explain it, it sounds so cut and dry, but in real life, it is really natural. Like it should just come out because like the plot and the character are the theme. Like that is it. Like that's how you get to the theme. Mm-hmm. Also, most of us figure the theme out after the book is done anyway. So I don't even.
That is so true.
Raquel, I had a quick question. Have you read any of Robin Wall Kimmerer's work by any chance?
Well, yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Up here, I have Braiding Sweetgrass, or somewhere in this office, I have Braiding Sweetgrass, and I did just. It took me about a year to read because I kept crying.
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, I love her, and I love her work. My grandmother raised us with some ideas on animism that really resonated when I read Braiding Sweetgrass.
It's such a good book. Sorry.
And I'm growing sweetgrass right now. I was inspired by her. I have sweetgrass in my yard, and it smells so good.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much. Okay, great. So this will be the last question, and it's a little bit of a fun one. So what are just some great relationships you've seen in any media? So anything, books, TV, video games, and what is it about them that worked and resonated with you?
I'm just going to say that I have been in a media slump, so it's going to take me a second to think about this one.
Whenever, like, I know you sent us the questions beforehand, but still, whenever someone asks this question, I just like immediately forget everything I've ever consumed. Just trying to think, like,
totally.
Like as if the last thing I read was like Lord of the Rings when I was 8. Frodo
All
and
right.
Sam.
I will say Leslie and Ben in Parks and Rec, I think, is a great relationship.
Yeah.
Because I think it's such a excellent example of a couple who push each other to be their best selves and also like are willing to step out of the way if it gives their partner an opportunity to shine. Also like a man who's unafraid of his like partner's ambition. Wow. Love that. Giving. I'm trying to think like YA wise, I'd be remiss if I didn't say Simon and Bram, because to me that's like that's my favorite like rom-com romance like ever probably. Let's see, Pacey and Joey on Dawson's Creek also were very formative for me in the early years, because it's another example of a man who loves a woman like unabashedly and also is like, you want to be an artist? Okay, I'm going to buy you a wall so you can just like practice your art. Yeah, Sean and Angela from Boy Meets World. I could do this all day, actually. OTP, bread and butter.
Yeah, I guess like literally right now, the things I am obsessed with are I'm watching Schitt's Creek, and
yes,
yeah, yes. Oh, I
don't know what I'm thinking of. I didn't say Patrick and David, but like, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we literally just watched the episode where Patrick proposed, and like I cried. I was like sobbing in the living rooms.
I just watched the coming out episode last night, and I was like, I can't even.
It's so good. Like, I mean, I meant like the relationship between them, but like all of the relationships in that show are so amazing. Like, highly recommend. The family, the friendships, they're developed so well. Yeah, masterclass in writing right there. What else am I obsessed with? I'm really into the Untamed right now. It's
yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a Chinese novel that got turned into a TV show that is now on Netflix. And it's amazing. I'm obsessed with it. I'm obsessed with everything the author writes. The relationship between the main characters like has literally changed the way I think about writing and storytelling in general. So another highly recommend The Untamed on Netflix, or the book. What else am I?
You want to talk about yearning though? Oh my god.
Yearning. Oh yeah. Okay. Oh, wait. I got this. I'm like looking at my bookshelf.
The Untamed, like the yearning in that, unbelievable.
Oh yeah. Oh, amazing. Like recommend across the board.
Oh, yeah.
I also grew up on like my mom and I would always watch the 1995 version of Pride and Prejudice, where it's like the BBC like mini series. Like we watch it every year. And like, yeah, Elizabeth and Darcy, amazing. Like just such a good relationship. Any version of that story is amazing. And then in terms of sapphic yearning, this is unfair because this book is not out yet, but I read One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston.
Oh, I'm jealous.
I knew you were gonna say
I knew it too. I knew it. I could feel it.
So good. Cried, laughed, cried more. It's amazing. Put on your list, pre-order it. It's so good.
I was actually going to say Red, White, and Royal Blue, which I have here. It's a great chemistry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's an adult book though, right? Or is it considered new adult? But
new
adult. Yeah, for YA, I just read Today, Tonight, Tomorrow by Rachel Lynn Solomon, which is an enemies to lovers romance that I just found so delightful and beautiful, and it took me like a day to read. Always loved that. But one thing I'm actually really interested in, and anyone who has read Sia Martinez knows that I'm an X-Files fan, and I really love the dynamic between Mulder and Scully. And I really want to read something like that that's modern, or maybe I'll write it.
Write it.
Yeah.
I want to read it.
Yeah, I would like that. I really think that the X-Files could have explored the humor in the juxtaposition of their personalities a little more, though. I think that would be fun. So
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, thank you. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you all so much for being here and having this discussion. I learned so much. And then just, to close out, if we can just let us know where we can find you on social media and where we can get your books.
I'm on Twitter at Nina Varela's with an S on the end, and Instagram, Nina Varela's S and then _. And my books are available anywhere books are sold, also at ninavarela.com.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at by Leah Johnson, so BY Leah Johnson. And you can also find my books wherever books are sold. But I do want to make a plug for supporting your local independent bookstore. We need indies to stay alive because a diversity of bookstores means a diversity of books. And so shop local if you can.
And you can find me, Twitter is poet_Raquel V. Gill. And I'm on Instagram, and I think that one's Raquel Vasquez Gilliand _poet, but I've been just limiting it to Twitter recently. So maybe soon I'll update Instagram, but I haven't been on in a good long while. And yeah, same, support independent bookstores. And that's where my books are as well.
There it is.
Thank you for saying that. Well, thank you so much again. And thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoy the rest of the virtual con. And yeah, have a great day.
Thank you so much for organizing this. And it was so nice meeting everyone. Nice meeting y'all.
Thank you. I had a wonderful time.